Hi, Mark from CharkBait here. Well, let's go fishing. Yeah, and what better place to do it than out of San Diego on the Red Rooster 3, a great long-range sport fisher. Best crew in the business, in my humble opinion. So I mentioned bait, and that's one way to do her. When the fish were more on the ridge in the 43, that's where the heavier jigs came into play. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But we're going to start out looking at the bait a little bit. And here you've got a live well with sardines swimming around. A wonderful, tasty little bait if there ever was one. And my wife likes to snack on the darn things anyway, and always asks me to bring back a few pieces of bait for her, which I kind of don't do. In any event, a couple of different things. You always learn something on a trip. And this time I saw something I rarely do see. Rarely. The majority of guys were shoulder hooking the baits. Deckhand suggested that, and it made a lot of sense as I saw how things kind of progressed. But with the shoulder hook, that hook presentation is better. It's not as visible, and bluefin are pretty line shy, pretty wary fish. They're no dummies. And it seemed also like the sea lions left it alone. And of course, after mentioning this bait and showing a little video that way, I got to say the first bite came on a slash jig, 400 gram. When we left the harbor and got onto that 43, we fished that a little bit in the early evening, and sure enough, first drop down, this fella got picked up on the slash, and he was on. It was a big stinking fish, to the point where pulled out any other line that was out there, and Tommy, the skipper, wound up trying to motor this thing to gain back some line on the freight train. Well, that didn't completely work because we ended up losing the fish, but it was kind of cool to see. Okay, now we've anchored up, we're back over there fishing, and first I got to point out Martin here. He's been on a few charters with us. Martin is a really good fisherman. He gets out there a lot, knows what he's doing, and you can tell the guy got bit 9 times and broke off 9 times before he caught his first fish. After he caught his first fish, the guy was dialed in. But I just want to reinforce the fact that we all have days like that. And we all have things we can learn. And I think Martin got this sucker figured out, because after he was 0 for 9, he wound up landing plenty of tuna. And that's the beauty about a long-range trip that's multiple days, like a 5-dayer. You can take a day off, you can go read a book. If you wind up having some bad luck, you can turn that sucker around. Go take a nap, relax. Come on back, you'll get another shot at it. Plenty of opportunities. And Martin well proved that point. Here's another one of our long-distance fishermen, Dan from over in Georgia, by way of Florida. I guess he's born in Florida, works in Georgia. And he came out with a few buddies. He's been on our trips before, and darn good fisherman, and he's a student of this game and has learned and learned and learned. I want you to note, he's fishing that little metalloid 2-speed, and I tell you, he learned to love that. And it's a new reel, relatively inexpensive at $220 for a 2-speed. It may not be the most sophisticated piece out there. I think it's got 4 bearings, but it's got a good drag system. And he used that thing to great effect, landing these tuna. Fishing, I think he would drop down to 30 and spent a lot of time at 40 pound on that. Real good place for it. Now, I wound up fishing 2 reels myself. I fished my little Andros, 2-speed, a 5.2, and I also fished my Macaira 10. I did that one with wind-on leaders, fishing it at 50 pound. The little Andros I fished at 30, and they both did dandy. Both of those reels did real well. Saw a fellow using a Pin Fathom 2-speed, 25 in. He bought from us right before the trip. That did well. The guys on the Avets did real well. Definitely not the place for an MXL, standard. A Raptor, okay. A JX or LX 2-speed, fine. HX is fine. All that sort of stuff seemed to work really well. But I was darn impressed with what the little metalloid would do on fish like these. And, he's a pretty good fisherman too. That doesn't hurt. You know, I mentioned the deckhands early on, and I've got to stress this so much. You see Fernando up on the bow helping with this fish. You know, we caught 160 tuna in this range, from maybe 60, 65 pounds all the way up to 100 pounds. And we got, you know, freight trained by a couple of them that just took off and schooled the guys. But we wouldn't have caught half those fish were it not for the crew. I saw some stuff on this trip that I haven't seen before. There was one time where another angler and myself, we both got wrapped in the anchor. The other guy was in the anchor quite a while, then my fish decided to come over there and do the same darn thing, and wrapped with his, wrapped around the anchor. Well, you know, Fernando, he tried and tried and tried just to, you know, get that around, get it around. But with two lines there, you're not going to untangle the doggone thing. And so I'm figuring, now these fish are lost. Tommy, his skipper, comes on down along with a couple other crew members that were, you know, experienced. So you had 4 guys up there at the bow trying to save 2 fish. And by God, they did it. They went ahead and cut the lines, and then they held on to these fish. You know, one guy on one line, one guy on the other line, had us move the rods around. The third man wound up tying the lines together, and both of us were back on those fish again. And I wound up getting mine. The other fellow lost his, you know, at the gaff. You know, but he got some more. It wasn't heartbreaking. But you know, I was just absolutely amazed at seeing these guys work, and you can see why the Rooster really is the top, if not one of the 3 top long-range boats for guys trying to get cow tuna. It ain't just about the hole; it's about the crew, and the crew is key. And you know, they've got continuity. They don't shoot through deckhands. You don't see different people every time out. The guys that work on the Rooster are proud to do so, and it's a job that's cherished or sought after by the other deckhands in you know, the landing down there in San Diego. It's a great boat to be in, and that comes from the top down. It comes from Linda, it comes from Andy Cates, it comes from Tommy, it comes from Fernando, it comes from all those guys that are part of this boat for a long, long time. Just an impressive boat. You know, I always learn stuff when I go on these charters, maybe because I take a little bit more time and kind of kick back, take some pictures, and I observe. I mentioned Mark and how, you know, he was snake bit there for a number of fish, and I think I kind of have it figured out. If you watch Mark, watch what he was doing on this boat, you'll see his rod was a little on the soft side. It was an old CalStar 870, which is a 30-pound stick, fairly light, an old fiberglass rod, light on the tip, you know, heavy in mass, but doesn't have great cranking power or pulling power. And so I believe that really his fish got a second wind. He's a great fisherman. That's why he got bit. But he wasn't able to keep those fish because they were just on too long. And they got their second wind and they beat the crap out of them. Now I want you to watch what this kid does. I say kid. Yeah, he went with his dad on this trip. Neat character, expo circle, all that sort of stuff. Athletic guy. But watch what he's doing. He is hammering those fish. Yeah, you'll see him on the video. Yeah, he's putting pressure on, he's keeping pressure on, and yeah, he could be out there for an hour, but typically I'm going to say he's a 30-minute man because he beat the fish up, the fish didn't beat him up, and he got him to the boat. Now, when the conditions got sloppier, you know, we were able to bump up the line test. I'd say majority of the guys wound up fishing 40-pound. I fished 50-pound on one of the days, and that worked for me on the short, you know, wind-on leaders. Fished my little Andros 5 2-speed as my 30-pound rig, and typically I stayed in high gear. I didn't really drop down because I was afraid of bending or pulling the hook. The Macaira 10 was the other piece I fished a lot of. I didn't go back to my usual go-to JX Abbott for 40-pound. I just went straight to the other piece and changed the wind on. So basically, I put my miles on 2 different reels. And I hadn't fished either one of them as much as I would have liked for the past year, so that's the reason why. One point, you know, small hooks seem to be a big plus, and so I was fishing a 3X Mustad ring circle hook. That worked real well for me on the 30-pound line. But when I bumped up to 50, and still I wanted to keep that hook profile small, so I used that same style hook. I wound up, having a bigger fish on the end of the line on that one, and fought it for, I don't know, hour and a half. And I got it back to the corner, and probably only about 25 feet away from being gaffed, and ended up, really buttoning down on that drag. And I bent the hook. I straightened it out and lost the fish. Again, it taught me a lesson. If you bump up to your 50 pound, maybe that's the right time to break out your 4X hook, which is what I did. I switched over to the trocars at that point, range for trocar, which is a great stand up fish.
No reason to get excited. The thief he kindly spoke. There are many here among us who feel that life is but a joke. But you and I, we've been through that. This is not our fate. So let us not talk falsely now. The hour is getting late. Kept the view while all the women came and went, barefoot servants too. Outside in the distance, a wildcat did growl. Two riders were approaching, and the wind began to howl.
I got to give Mark some credit here. He's been on this charter a number of times, and he wound up catching more than his fair share of fish, and also wound up taking on with the jackpot. I think it's the first time he's gotten the jackpot this way. And I got to say, it is super neat seeing so many guys get their personal bests and then come back the next day and beat that with another personal best. I think one fellow said he had 5 personal bests on this trip. Just one after another. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing, for this nice, consistent rate of fish that we were in. It really gave me a chance to learn a few things, try a few different techniques. It probably would have been good.
We've been metering fish, but right now it's almost a solid red line between 18 and 30 fathoms. It's just, I've never seen it this thick. Really stacked right now.
I mentioned the reels I was fishing a little bit. I'll go ahead and put a plug in for the rods as well. I brought nothing but my United composite rods with me this time. I fished the US 70 H on my little Andros 5.2 speed. Wonderful rod. That's the old school Bluefin design, which is a straight dual helix carbon fiber, no glass. Great rod. Just wonderful action. Got my fish. It beat the fish up well. Love that rod. For 30 pound, it's a dandy. And then I fished my CP, or the Challenger Platinum Series, United Composites. And I've been fishing UCs for, 10, 15 years now. And those are basically all I fish. I do fish a couple of the Ahi Assassin jigging rods and popping rods. They fit a real nice niche. But in general, my rod's a choice of the UCs, and I think for good reason. There were CalStars out there. A couple of guys like Mark was fishing, I think it was a 6470 Super Seeker. The old school Seekers when they were making them themselves, dandy rods. I saw, let's see, there were some Phoenix rods out there. I can't speak to those guys. Different sort of action, and that's a Chinese build rod, which, you know, that says enough to me. Prefer the U.S. gear, but that's, you know, different strokes for different folks. But in my estimation, those United composite rods, and I think the other guys that fished them would agree, wonderful pieces, and they certainly help get the fish out. Well, thank you for putting up with my taste in music and for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you picked up a couple of things and watching, and I hope it got you salivating for you know, to save up a little money and jump on one of these charters. You know, I've said it many times, but you know, these long-range charters out of San Diego, you know, any of the boats that are geared for this type of fishing, and I mean that sincerely, geared for this kind of fishing on long distance stuff. Yeah, if they're good for a 10-day plus, you know it's a great boat, and you'll have the time of your life. And if you sit back and actually do the math to it, this is an inexpensive vacation, guys. The food is top drawer, the accommodations are great. You know, you're doing something you like to do. You will get a chance to relax, because probably by the time you eat dinner, you're ready to go to bed. You know, and then get up and go at it. You know, on this trip even more so, because these were gentlemen's type fish. You know, they didn't really turn on until about 10 or 10:30 a.m. And then you know, we had dinner at about 6 or 6:30. And we called it a night. Only, you know, tried to make bait one night, and even then was no biggie. So it was a very smooth and nice time. But again, back to the trips. For the amount of money you spend to go on one of these things, figuring the meals are included, your entertainment's included, and everything else, it's an inexpensive vacation. That's one heck of a great time. So I encourage you, if you can, get a ride, take one of these trips. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. Mark out.
You should be here.